Diverter valves. Here it is. This is a turbo off of Fiat 124. It could be turbo off of almost any Fiat and actually a lot of other cars. Cars have these diverter valves, sometimes called bypass valves, installed. I don't know why Fiat calls it a diverter valve, don't really care. In any case, the purpose of this valve is to relieve pressure from the high pressure side of the turbo here and dump that boost through this hole into the low pressure side, meaning the intake portion of the turbo here. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. The most common reason is you're at full throttle, high RPM, high boost, and you let off on the throttle suddenly, usually to shift, and when you do that, the throttle plate closes and all this boost has to go somewhere to go. If it doesn't, it will hopefully rupture the intercooler piping. That would be your best case scenario. Worst case scenario would be it would damage the turbocharger compressor or even possibly bend the throttle plate. Wrecking or damaging the turbo compressor is more common. So it's very important that this thing open when you suddenly let off on the throttle when you're at high boost. It does another thing. It will also open when the ECU, so it connects to the engine's ECU through this electrical plug. When the ECU decides that for some reason it needs to protect the engine from overboost or it thinks something is wrong, it will open that valve and regulate boost that way. That's not the engine's first line of defense, it's about the third or fourth, but it is involved in the engine's, or correctly the ECU's, engine protection strategy. So it's an important device. Now, the problem with it is the factory one leaks. You lose a little bit of boost, and it also doesn't respond as quickly or as smoothly as maybe it could. So a lot of people will upgrade these with one called GFB, Go Fast Bits, which is a plate that goes in between here and replaces some of the mechanism. And the GFB valve is quite good, very popular. However, I like the forge valve better, and I'm going to explain why. When I test this for leaks, and then I spray soapy solution, soap and water around this area, I see a lot of leaks. In other words, I pressurize the turbo and spray soap on here, and I see a lot of bubbles. Therefore, I know it's leaking. I put the GFB valve on there, and I see fewer bubbles. So that makes me happy. Fewer bubbles, less leakage. I put the forge valve on there, and there will be no bubbles. The forge valve does not leak at all, and that's desirable to me. Now, one quick caveat, I will absolutely admit that I could be, it's possible that there's a real flaw in my testing procedure, because what I do is I plug this, I've got a tire valve on the one that plugs in here so that I can use compressed air to pressurize it to about 25 psi, which is what it would operate under at max boost with a tune on it anyhow, or a commonly available tune. And when I do that, it's under pressure, I spray and test for leaks. Well, the potential flaw in that test is that I'm also pressurizing, well, I have no way to avoid it, pressure is also reaching, I should say, the inlet portion, which would not happen with actual operation on the car, but I don't have any way to test it any other way. So anyway, it's a possible flaw in my testing, but maybe not. In any case, the way I test it, this one leaks, the GFB valve leaks less, which is desirable. The GFB valve responds better and more smoothly, also desirable. But the forge one does all of these things and doesn't leak at all. So let's take a look at the forge valve and discuss how to hook it up. Here's the forge valve. I really like it. It's available in two versions. This one is the atmospheric one. It vents that overboard boost through these holes. There are holes all the way around it. And that makes a bit of a whooshing sound. It's not overly dramatic. I've grown really accustomed to it. In fact, I really like it. I will probably never go back on one of these cars to a non-atmospheric valve, and I'm going to convert all the Fiats I own to this valve. I really, really like it. So, the way it works is pretty simple. This portion here is entirely mechanical, and the electrical portion is over here. And I think this valve is a little bit intimidating, and that's why it tends to not be the valve of choice. It's also a little bit expensive, but believe me, when you hold it in your hand or drive the car, you will know where that money spent, or where that money went, to paraphrase the drug dealer from Pulp Fiction. In any case, here's how you hook it up. And I think you're going to see this is fairly simple. I used red hoses. I own a hose company, and so I substituted the Forge factory black hoses with my own red hoses, which makes them easier to see for this video. My wife pointed out to me, getting off track here, but that I used the wrong red. I didn't realize we have a specific red for Euro compulsion, and I used our normal product lines red when in fact we have Euro compulsion red vacuum lines. So I guess I dropped the ball there, although I'm not really concerned about it, but my wife didn't like it. Anyhow, here's how this works. You put the included solenoid somewhere. In the case of the 124, I just bent the bracket slightly and connected it right there to the coolant tank reservoir. It fits there perfectly. I think it's really nice. Now, start hooking up the 3 hoses. We've got one hose here. That connects to... My car just beeped at me. Oh, I had my key fob in the pocket and leaned against the car. Anyway, the hose connects the forge valve to this fitting on the forge solenoid. So I just don't know how that could be any more simple. Now, the next 2 hoses are a little more complicated, but not much. This hose, the one that's by the electrical plug, connects to, meaning it tees into, there you go, see the little T connection? I connected this hose to the hose that runs from the underside of the turbocharger compressor, you can't see it, but it's down there underneath this intake tube, to the, let's see if we can see it, there you can just see it, the bottom of this solenoid that's mounted to the cylinder head. So the factory line would be black. It would connect the bottom of that solenoid to the bottom of the turbo compressor. It's very easy to find. It's the only line that's located on the turbo compressor. So you should be able to find that, and then you tee this line into it, which goes to this fitting. So that covers 2 lines. One goes directly there, the other tees into the line coming from the turbo compressor. And actually, there you go. You can see the line coming off the bottom of the compressor there. That's what you're going to tee into for this forward fitting. The last fitting, the rear one, is probably the most complex, but still this is just a no-brainer. So this hose connects to the vacuum line. This car has a vacuum pump on the back of the engine. You're looking at the back side of the vacuum pump there. Take off this strut bar, and then you can reach in there. This is the factory connector you're going to disconnect. Now, normally it would be connected where this red hose is connected. So you unplug that, pull it off, and put this T fitting in there. So you've now tapped into vacuum for the valve. So the way it works is this. When the ECU, through the wiring, signals this to open the valve, what it does is it connects these 2 hoses. It's just a simple solenoid. When it connects these 2 hoses, it puts vacuum on the forge valve and opens it. When those hoses are not connected, it's putting boost on this valve and closes it. Now, there's a lot of discussion about what spring to use in the forge valve. This car is using the yellow spring. Very happy with the yellow spring. There is a stiffer spring, but the valve is constructed in such a way that as long as there's boost on it, there is more pressure holding it closed than open. It's a mathematical certainty that regardless of what spring you have, on boost, this thing is going to stay closed unless the ECU signals it to open, or you have a leak in one of the lines that's providing boost to this, in which case it could definitely be forced open. So the only real reason to change springs is to alter the rate at which it opens. So that's something that people can experiment with. But as for whether it opens or not, that is determined by this device here and the engine ECU. At least as the valve is intended to be hooked up by forge, which is what I've just shown you. There are some alternate ways to do it which may or may not be desirable depending on what it is you're trying to do. So anyhow, that's it. Forge valve, that's the atmospheric one. There's a non-atmospheric one that doesn't make the whoosh sound also. It absolutely does not leak, works perfectly. It's a little pricey, but like I say, you'll know where your money went. I'm a big fan of this product. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe, and have a good day.